So guys, in the 100 years that Aston Martin has existed, and in the 75 years that the DB name has existed, petrol heads have always lusted after the Grand Tourer from Aston Martin. And this new DB12 starts a whole new era for the company, taking it much further than it's ever tried to go in the past. Aston referred to it as the Super Tourer, and this DB12 can easily be written off as just a mere facelift, but don't think that way, because actually the changes under here are the first signs that Aston are really taking things seriously in terms of being ahead of their competition, not just in a few areas, but in every area that they can manage. In fact, the DB12 now is so important, it started a chain reaction across all the other models available in Aston's range. So our new Vantage also takes cues from all the changes that have come from here, as you guys have seen in our other video. And today I'll be showing you the new DBX that has also had the same changes. So the DB12 starting a new era with a unified approach across all of the models at Aston, as it should, being their flagship model. So today we're going to leave no stone unturned. I'm going to divulge all the secrets under the skin of what has changed in DB12 that makes it so significant. We will also then, of course, check out the interior and the huge changes going on there, including the changes that then trickle into the new DBX, which I will also show you. And then finally, we will finally go on a drive with this, talk about the rivals that it has and how has it improved versus DB11. So let's check out this Aston Martin DB12 Super Tourer. Guys, this Father's Day, don't give your dad another fart joke card or a best dad in the world mug. Instead, give him the best tools that he can use for the whole year with our sponsor for today's episode, and that's Manscaped. Manscaped have sponsored RBR for age now, and they are trusted by over 10 million men for their trimmers and their hygiene products, which are absolutely brilliant, and I absolutely swear by them. And today I'm going to talk about two of my favorite ones. One is the Handyman, and the other one is the Weed Whacker. Both fantastic gifts for this Father's Day. The Handyman is the perfect portable shaver to get rid of that 3-day dad stubble that we end up getting. It's got an advanced dual blade setup, so we've got a long hair leveling blade and a foil shaver, which gives you that ultra clean and crisp finish like I've got going on here. But that's not all. It's got skin safe technology. It's got a battery that lasts for a whole hour and USB-C to charge up really easily as well. I take it on every trip I go on, along with the beard hedger, and both of these together help me just keep nice and smart. Then we got one that all dads need, which is the Weed Whacker 2.0 nose and ear hair trimmer. As dads get older, we start to get weeds growing out of every single orifice, which is why the Weed Whacker is here. It's got a 7,000 RPM blade with a 360-degree blade, which will just help get rid of all those hairs in the wrong places. And just like every Manscaped product, you got an LED battery indicator, USB-C, and they're all waterproof as well. And remember my favorite one, the beard hedger, and of course we've got the lawnmower 5.0. The perfect gifts for any dad this year to help them look smart throughout the year. Of course, as an RBR viewer, you got a great discount. Head over to manscaped.com and use the code RBR and you'll get straight 20% off plus free international shipping. So that's 20% off plus free international shipping with the code RBR. Guys, a huge thanks for supporting our best regular sponsors. Now, let's head back to the episode. Petrol heads can always agree on an Aston Grand Tourer that they are just simply beautiful, and that's across every decade of these cars. But is this really the world's first Super Tourer? That's a bold claim made by a company and a series of cars in the DBs that they've always been hindered in some way. Like in the modern era with the DB9, if you can still call that modern, it was hindered because it wasn't quite as dynamic and sporty as its rivals. It had, again, a really basic infotainment system. You come into DB11, this was much better in terms of dynamics and handling, thanks to that bonded aluminium platform and a team behind the scenes who really pushed the envelope on every single model in that era to be super drivers cars. But then they were hindered again by hand-me-downs from Mercedes in terms of the interior and the infotainment that everybody would mention at the first chance. Now DB12 builds upon the driving prowess that the previous gen started so well with all of its models, but adds in that key factor. Finally, the first ever in-house Aston Martin infotainment system that, of course, I'm going to show you today. And I think a lot of this you can thank the new CEO and CTO of Aston Martin, who are Amedeo Felisa and Roberto Fedeli. These guys have replaced Tobias Moores of AMG fame and have actually come over from Ferrari. And they're extremely experienced and I think that kind of points toward why they're using this Super Tourer name so boldly when the Roma already exists. These guys aren't playing around and they are keen to make Aston a fighting force in this part of the industry. Now that's all great, we can all make big statements. Let's see if DB12 can live up to it, and we're going to start by peeling back the skin. Of course we still have the bonded aluminium platform, let's ignore that. Let's talk about the power upgrades first. DB11 had 528 brake horsepower, 700 Newton meters. This has still got the V8, so we haven't got the V12 anymore. Don't cry just yet, because this one produces 680 PS, 800 Newton meters, 0 to 60 of 3.5 seconds. This is still extremely powerful. That is a 34% increase in pure power. We've got modified camshafts, compression ratio, bigger turbos in there as well. So still that same great 4-litre V8, but pushing out way more power. But with more power comes more responsibility. I didn't mean to, anyway. It's actually got a whole new cooling system to handle that power as well. So we've got much larger apertures and face areas in terms of cooling. We've got additional radiators, additional coolers as well. All of that to help with the increased engine power of this lovely V8. And of course we've got the bonnet vents to help release some of that heat as well. But we missed the V12, as some of you will rightfully say, but you won't miss it in terms of performance, because that's more power than even the AMR version of the DB11 had in the previous generation, and the V8 saves a lot of weight. We're talking 85 kg lighter than the DB11 V12 of the last generation. That's even more weight saved than what we had in the Superleggera DBS of that generation as well. So don't worry too much about that. In terms of power, it also far surpasses its rivals in things that we will talk about shortly as well. Now all of that goes to the rear wheels. This is a rear wheel driven car, which a lot of us purists will be very happy about. And then we have an updated 8-speed gearbox with a shorter final drive ratio that's really going to help with launching. In addition to that, all linking nicely together, we're talking rear wheel drive, the gearbox. This is the first DB car to have Aston's famed eDiff, or electronic rear differential, that can go from 0 to 100% lock in milliseconds and works really smartly with the ESP and the suspension system that I'm about to tell you about to make this car even better at putting power down. So alongside all of that story about power delivery on the road, etc., we've also got a new compound of tyre, which is the missing part here, right? So it's developed with Michelin, and it is the new Pilot Sport S5 AML. And you can see the logo, it's right there, and that is hopefully going to help again with that whole story. Then the other side that we really want to correct it is the steering feel, because a bit wishy-washy in the previous cars. Now we've got a rigid mounted electromechanical steering rack that, again, let us hope, let's see when we drive it later, whether that helps in that regard. More important than all of that is the new suspension system. We've got a whole new active damper, really intelligent suspension system here that hopefully is going to increase the breadth of ability of DB to be even more comfortable, even more sporty. As you're hearing in every new car these days, Aston Martin not behind in this at all. So these dampers should react really quite quickly. We will see what it's like in town driving and faster later. In addition to that though, they've done more for rigidity. So much so that this aluminium platform is now 7% more rigid. We've got the cross brace across our engine that you could see in there. We've got numerous struts, we've got under trays, etc. on the front and on the rear. And then finally, firmer springs and anti-roll bars finish off the package. In terms of brakes, you get steel brakes as standard, and then the ceramics, if you option them, instead of just the pure performance, we're talking a 27 kg reduction of the dry weight as well. So quite important, and we've got that on the car today, so we will see what that is like. That is the entirety, so some big changes. Those big changes also come into the design. It's actually a really big change. It might fool you into thinking that it's just the front that's changed and the rear is still totally DB11. That is not the case, because this is a wider car. It's 6mm wider on the front, which, yeah, maybe not that much, but 22mm wider on the rear. So it's much more of like a DBS type of width of body, and in person it's very obvious. It's obvious even on the rear, even though it may not look like that. I was never really a fan of DB11's front end particularly. Like the rear, it was okay, I was okay with. The front end just, it looked muted to me. Like it looked like it was waiting for DBS. Do you understand what I mean? This doesn't look like that. If you told me this was the front end of the new DBS, I would believe you, because it's it's aggressive enough. It's got enough 177, it's got enough of that aggressive Aston Martin DNA to, you know, stand by itself and not wait for anything else, which is cool. I like it. Let's take a look around it. Okay, my friend, so the design, I really like it. It's a really, really aggressive Aston Martin, particularly from that front end, which I just think is absolutely gorgeous. It reminds me of like 177, it reminds me of DBS, it reminds me of all the great classics, particularly in this extremely, extremely James Bond type spec. I'm sure you guys would agree. I've brought the right watch to the game, guys. I'm here, I'm representing you Bond fans, and that is beautiful, I think. I like the front end changes, of course, a lot more than the rear, though the rear is wider, and we'll take a look at that in a second. We've got like some lovely carbon fiber flicks at the bottom. You can see, as I mentioned, the much larger apertures for the cooling, etc. on the front. A nice big lower splitter tied with those carbon bits. The lights have been redone here to a new signature style, which I think are quite pretty. They're not as boring as many manufacturers are doing these days. The grille is simply huge, and I love it. Aston grills should be huge, and the bonnet is gorgeous as well, with some really nice power domes and those air outlets at the top as well to reduce heat. We also got an all new Aston Martin badge on the front, so it's still made in the same way by the same manufacturing family that has always made it, but this is all new. It's a bit simplified, and this is the first car to start it. The side is exactly what you expect, Aston Martin Grand Tourer. This front wing area, still very DB11, isn't it? With the air outlet element within our wheel arch here. You've got Aston Martin written within there. Wheel choice, there's tons of wheel choices. This is quite a nice one actually. I do quite like the bronze one that they do as well. And then in there you can see our carbon ceramics hiding as well. You've got an additional lower carbon flick at the bottom here that you did not find in the previous car. But like I said, on the front, and I think you really can tell that width element on the front. We also have these brand new frameless wing mirrors, which are beautiful. Look at that, completely edge-to-edge glass. Quite a unique aerodynamic shape on these. I like these. These are very nice. But like I said, the rear, potentially less pleasing to your eyes, but it's definitely wider. Like, this has got a really, really bold rear end. I love it. I think the lights work better because it's got a wider body. You can see the arches. It's just flaring out a little bit more. The lights seem smaller than they were before. The exhausts are a little more tucked in. The tyres are right on the edge. It all just really works for me. Would I have liked a slightly bigger change that was a bit more DBS-like on the rear? Yes, I would. But I think what we have here still works really, really well. I mean, look at that rear three-quarter. I mean, it's just gorgeous. So, yes, I love it. I think it looks great. It's exactly what you want an Aston flagship Grand Tourer to look like. But now the big changes, the huge changes, are inside. Let me show you those now. So guys, welcome to the massively updated interior of the Aston DB cars. Now, one thing I love doing now on RBR is, as well as the outside VFX, I like doing internal VFX, because when it's a huge change like this car, you can really see just how big of a change it is, and it is massive. If you remember previously, this entire center console area kind of dipped down and was much more, I think, vertical in that area with your little screen over there. You had the Mercedes touchpad in the middle here, your typical Aston Martin buttons over there. It was still very traditional DB9 looking, but with a kind of a few Merc bits tacked on. Then we had the old steering wheel, which I wasn't really a fan of. Like, it had a huge airbag in the middle. The paddle shifters were nice, and then you had the buttons within there. It just didn't look sporty enough to me. I didn't mind the interior structure so much actually, and I liked the old Aston buttons. They were cool, but they've been around for ages as well, haven't they? So it's nice to see something completely different, particularly with this dashboard, which is like a completely straight line going through the middle here. And that's very different to that old vertical style. And then you've got kind of the center console here. And what's nice is what they could have done is done the whole touchscreen thing, where the whole thing is literally just touchscreen based, right? They haven't done that. Instead, Aston have spent a lot of time and money making actual physical buttons. Buttons are really, really important. So we've got lots of buttons here. I want to show you all of that from my perspective, because I think it's going to be a bit more impactful. And then we will also look a little bit at practicality, etc. of DB12. But it's great for you to see from that angle in particular just how big of a change we've had here. First thing that really hits you, like we said, is that whole area, which is completely redone, like nothing brought from the old cars. And then you've got a whole new steering wheel as well, new driver zone, literally everything. I think the only thing that probably remains is a bit of the door cards, which is fine. And then you've still got your seat controls down here, as we used to have in DB11. But even our storage bit here has now got USB-Cs in here, so it's all up to date. Got new cup holders down here. All of it has been redone. That's interesting. We've got, you can see my fingerprints on there. That's something Aston customers won't be used to, because we've never had a touchscreen in an Aston before. This is the first one, and now you guys can enjoy having fingerprints on your screens as well, Aston customers. So this is the all-new system, and what's quite impressive is that Aston had to put a lot of investment into this. It wasn't just a case of making their own OS, etc., which they had to do. They also had to set up data centers across the world for GDPR and data protection and all of that. So it was a big cost exercise to do their own OS and their own data, etc. So I'm impressed that they've gone to the trouble of doing that. Anyway, this is the system, and is actually pretty reactive. Sometimes there's a little bit of lag, but when it works, then it works really, really well, and it's really, really quick to react as well. You can see now we've got things like ambient lighting, like a whole host of different colors that you can do. The simple things like this that Aston customers have been missing out on. So it's so nice that you get to enjoy things that the rest of us have been enjoying for quite some time. I think they've made some errors that everyone makes when they make their first OS. Like the fonts are just too small. I think the touch points are too small. Like you've got these slidey icons here that you're meant to be able to slide that you don't really slide, you just tap on each side. So why are they sliders? Just make buttons. Little things like that. But apart from that, it's actually quite a good system. This is your zero layer where you've got your smart climate control, and you've got your contacts, etc., your music. We've got drive modes here. We'll talk about how to change drive modes with this in a second. Telemetry is nice because it gives you a bit of the information when you're driving, as we will use later. Then you've got all your assistance features, etc. It's a good system. One downside, though, has been that we've gone to a digital drive zone. Maybe it's a downside, maybe it's not. I really loved the cowl and everything that the previous DB11 and the DBS had. It was so cool. If we could have somehow mixed analog and digital on this, because like we said, we love a bit of analog, don't we? That would have been nice. But the new steering wheel's nice. It looks familiar though. It really looks like I don't want to say, it looks like a Mercedes steering wheel. The spoke just really reminds me of that. But the buttons, everything, this is all new. So you're able to control the content that you see in front. For example, you can change into driving assistance. We can change the view that you see here from this layout to a center layout, which is more kind of traditional Aston Martin, if you like. I mean, by no means groundbreaking in terms of the UI design, but it's okay. I'd like to see them work on that, because the fonts and the way you've got kind of a skeuomorphic design trying to be real things, it's okay, but I think Aston, given how good they do exterior design, can make this even better than it is now. And all of that, of course, now can be done with over-the-air updates, which they are supporting, which is great, because it means a car like this, though might have this now, with an update could be made much better later. For example, we have CarPlay in this car. In this car currently, it is wired, but then an over-the-air update is rolling out for it to be wireless as well, as you will see in the DBX, which I will show you shortly. Even with CarPlay, you will note that the buttons are absolutely tiny. So I don't know if that's a setting that Aston could change, but again, it's one of those things where touch points is just feeling a little bit small. So the steering wheel, I think it's nice. It is familiar looking, but it's really nice. It's a lot sportier. I like the fact it's flat bottomed. One thing that irks me though is this, the Mercedes indicator. Like, you've changed everything. Everything looks great. And that's just a reminder for people to moan at. I don't care. Like, I'll drive this car happily, but other people will just be like, oh, well, it's got the Mercedes stalk in it. And it's like, you know, it just puts a downer on everything. Like, get rid of it. Like, do your own one. And I love the fact that we've got these beautiful vents now, which are really well done, nice and analog. And then you can see the ambient lighting hiding underneath there, which is gorgeous. Lots of lovely ambient lighting all around this car now, which really pops at night. And one thing that I absolutely love is how many buttons they've kept here. We've got nice roller buttons for our temperature here. You've got volume as well. All your driving select options are here. For example, exhaust. We've got the suspension settings, auto stop start, ESP, etc. You have got some touch buttons, for example, for your seat heating, your seat ventilation, and then manual mode, park, etc. The best one though is this, where this chooses your driving mode. And it's really actually quite satisfying because it's a hard click that you get, and yeah, I like it. And this car sounds fantastic. Let's do that again. Let me turn it on again and show you what it sounds like. So the car sounds great. When you change mode, you will notice in your driver zone, we go from red to yellow for sport, and then to like a tan brownish color for the GT mode. So that's a nice change that you get to see inside the system as well. Another cool thing is you have got a decent 360-degree camera here. You can see the G-Wagon parked there. Which again, on a big GT car like this, you really want that so you can save your wheels and maneuver it with some ease because you've got a really long bonnet. So it's nice that we have 360 camera in here as well. Now in terms of practicality, this is still a small boot with a small aperture and a deck that doesn't go that high. So it's not like the hatchback rear that you find in a lot of rivals. Things like the AMG GT have a lot more space in the rear. This is more similar to the other rivals that we mentioned. It's not terrible. You still got your lovely Aston umbrella in there, etc. But it's not the be-all and end-all when it comes to space in a car. The story is the same on the rear, which is beautifully stitched, same as our front. However, in terms of actual space available, as you can probably tell, maximum early teens, I think, are going to be okay in this. You could probably fit a small adult if they're okay on some smaller journeys. It's nice to have the option though to fit someone in the back. I always say that, because if you're a family person, if you're a person who wants to take their friends out and enjoy your pride and joy with them, then this is a huge, huge bonus. Now, as nice as this interior is, you could get an even better interior because you have unlimited customization available to you. One amazing one I saw was a tan leather interior with quilted stitching, diamond quilted, and it was absolutely gorgeous. You had a bit of suede, a bit of leather. It looked amazing. So really it's up to you how you want these cars to look. I love the fact that there's so much space for carbon fiber in these cars, unlike a lot of manufacturers who skimp out. You've got carbon within this as well, and it all just kind of looks so much higher quality than everyone else. I can't think of another car interior off the top of my head that is trimmed as nicely as this is. So that's the updated interior of the DB12. Now let's go and check out how the DBX has had its update. It's just happened. Huge update for the interior on DBX 707. Let's go to Gaydon HQ and check that out now. So guys, just like DB12, DBX 707 has had a big update in this new era of Aston Martin, and a much needed one. This is the old interior with the Mercedes touchpad, very recognizable. Your Aston Martin drive buttons at the top there with park, drive, etc. The thick old steering wheel that I was never a fan of, and of course the familiar center structure as well, which was quite recognizable across that era of Aston. Now, you go into the new one, it's all changed. Now let me show you an even more punchy interior where you can really see the design changes. How's that for a punchy interior? Just like the exterior of this car. I love it, and I think 707 needs to be on that level considering the cars that it's going up against. So guys, check that out. Big, big change, as you can see. Particularly this area. You've still got lots of buttons, which I always say in my reviews of cars with huge touchscreens. Touchscreens aren't that safe, and it's good to have buttons for necessary things. So yeah, that is all great. I love all of that. Again, it matches DB12. Another cool thing that I found is, well, yes, we've got CarPlay, as every car does these days. Check this out. We've actually got CarPlay within our driver zone on here as well, and it's one of the first cars I've seen to do it. So we've got Apple Maps on there. Aston not just keeping up, but being a bit ahead of the competition now, using a feature that I think a lot of us will love. So not unlike DB12, the one thing that DBX 707 was missing was a great interior. It's the one thing everyone complained about, that yeah, great car, super dynamic, right up there with the best super SUVs, but is let down by the hand-me-down interior. That's not the case anymore. Now it's exactly where an Aston should be, kind of pushing the quality side of things, the analog side of things, and I really, really like it. So guys, that's your DBX and DB12 interior, all really impressive. Remember, you can also get the Volante, as is very predictable, and that's available in DB12 now as well. Now, what's coming after this? DBS has been spotted. It's been spotted with a vastly different looking design language to this, like vastly, particularly on the rear. It's looking much more to me like it's inspired by the Aston Valor, the Victor, you know, those ilk of cars, which is nice because I really do like the way that those look. The grille, not quite like those, it seems to be just a bigger DBS grille. But I'm excited to see that. I'm more excited to know what's under the hood. I wonder if they'll go V12. Aston recently announced that the V12 is coming back and it will vanquish all of its foes. So is that a hint for this car to be called DBS Vanquish? All signs point to that and to this car being a V12, but we will see. Now, before we drive, I want to have a quick talk about the rivals, because it's important that we keep the rivals of this car in our head while we're driving the car. The first one is, of course, from Maranello, and that is the Roma. Now, the Roma is nowhere near as powerful as this car. It's 612 odd brake horsepower. Similar format though, long bonnet. We've got the same type of seating arrangement. They've also done an updated interior system. From everything that I've read, because I've not driven this yet, it is apparently a sportier, more dynamic car. But then the interior, in terms of the fiddliness of the new system, isn't quite there. Of course, it's nowhere near as powerful. To my eyes, it's not as aggressive looking. I prefer the look of the DB12. This is a completely subjective thing. I know when it came out, and even today, a lot of people still compare the Roma to the DB11, and I think that is actually fair enough. But yeah, the other interesting one that people bring in, again, magazines a lot, is Conti GT. I think Bentley have moved on this a little bit, and so have Aston. I think Bentley kind of own the luxury GT space, and they do it really well. And because of that, they compromise the sporting ability of their cars, which they're okay with because they're genuinely brilliant, more spacious Grand Tourers. Aston are kind of like, well, we want to be sportier. We're involved in F1. You know, we're that side of things. So again, I don't think it's as relevant as it used to be. One that I really think is relevant, and hardly anybody I've seen speaking about it, is the new AMG GT, which might seem weird for me to say to you, but the GT has now evolved, at least in its first iteration, into more of a Grand Touring car. So we've got a similar seating setup as this. The price of a fully spec GT is the price of the starting price of this. Yes, it's less powerful at 585 brake horsepower as it currently stands, but it's hugely quick 0 to 60 as we tested on the channel. The interior is right up there with this as well, with as much, if not more tech, and it can be, you know, trimmed and quilted to look quite nice as well. And it all looks really quite similar. And of course, we've got the same engine here as well, right? So I think this is a bit more of an apt comparison to make. I think Aston holds the key though, in terms of the heritage element, and potentially future values and stuff. Who knows? Let's see. Bear these in mind while we go for a drive. Right guys, so here we are in DB12. Let's first get our exhaust nice and loud, even in GT mode. Now the first 100 yards with this car, and you immediately feel a little bit difference in the steering. It feels a little bit more, in fact a lot more communicative, a lot more pointy on the front end. And I'm comparing this directly now to DB11 V12 because I think that's the right comparison to make with DB12. And versus that car, it's a car that immediately feels more nimble, lighter on its feet. The steering just feels better. The suspension just feels more grown up, more modern. And you feel that, I think, in the first 100 yards. What's nice and familiar is the nice V8 growl. As subdued as you'd like it to be in an Aston Martin, it does not sound AMG-like. We'll talk about sound. Even in GT mode on like our terrible British country roads, you put your foot down, the V8 growl is there, the suspension is clever, and you don't get like jarred by the little bumps, particularly in GT mode. It's great. And you keep that exhaust on and the car just feels silky smooth. Just such a great tourer, even in some of the worst roads that I test cars on. It's just unflappable. But don't worry, we're not going to live in GT mode for all of this review. In fact, we're going to start off in Sport Plus, as we should. Let's dial everything up, because I want to see what this thing is like when you really start to push it, because those first few 100 yards communicate a car that is just better at directional changes. The steering is lovely. The power delivery of the V8 is superb. 680 PS is a lot for a rear-wheel drive big GT car. Normally manufacturers would go safe and add some kind of all-wheel drive system. Aston could do that. They've done it in DBX, but they chose not to on DB12, and I think it was the right decision. Sounds great. It's so quick through corners. It's really eager to steer, and the steering's not quite as communicative as a sports car. You still have that numbness, which kind of annoys me, but there's no doubt that it points and it does get you the feedback. Like I said, I want to keep comparing this to DB11 V12, and it's just a definite big notch above that. Honestly, I don't kid you, with the carbon ceramic brakes and the type of steering that this car now has, the directional changes you can make with this are genuinely sports car-like. It's so impressive. And it really takes your breath away when you start to put the power down. Right, now we need to test the launch control, because a lot has been made of the fact that the power is put down better in DB12. So let's see how it does on launch. Got a wheel slip, but when it gets going, oh my god. So the wheel slip didn't help, and it does happen quite often because, of course, it's a really powerful rear-wheel drive car. So that was 3.7 seconds, which is still damn quick, but not quite at that 3.5 that they are quoting. Let's talk about speed. It's so fast. It is ridiculously fast. And what's great is how quickly it puts the power down. There's no lag. The V8 is as great as it ever was, but that paired with, you know, the updates to the gearbox, to your diff, it can put the power down so well. It's on delivery, the whole 680 PS, and it's intimidating. It's all going to the rear wheels. But what's nice is you really can put the power down because of the way that the E-diff is so much better than the old diff that this car had. You've got those lovely tyres from Michelin as well, doing the job, and it just gives you the confidence to drive this faster and faster than you ever could any previous DB, at least the standard DB. Just imagine what the DBS will be doing in this generation. It's scary to think how good that car could be. This, the rigidity, particularly in Sport Plus, like, it's stable. It feels much more sports car. It feels more super. And that's where this whole, I think, super tourer thing is coming in, that genuinely is the case. The point is, for the purposes of a Grand Tourer, this is hugely fast in every scenario. And in fact, in every mode. You know, you go into GT mode as well, and it's not like suddenly the car is crippled. If anything, I quite like the power on offer in GT mode. It's a bit more, like, Sport Plus feels way too fast for normal roads. It is ridiculous. But I guess, you know, ridiculous is kind of what we're going for here. This is, like they say, a super tourer. So why don't we have a crazy amount of horsepower on tap going to the rear wheels? I want to talk a little bit about sound, because understandably, with the V12 gone, Aston Martin customers are a bit upset. I don't think as upset as you might have thought, because they do love their V8s as well, and they understand where the world is going. But let me tell you, this doesn't sound like an AMG V8. I've owned every single iteration of this 4-litre V8 by AMG, and this version, the Aston Martin version, sounds like none of them. Aston have their own tune, the revs sound different, the pops and bangs rarely come, and when they do, they're of a different quality. Sometimes you get some quite naturally aspirated sounding ones as well, which is nice, but it's never, you know, over the top as you'd find like in the new AMG GT or the SL, which go absolutely crazy on exhaust like AMG customers want. This is a bit more for the discerning Aston customer, and it works. So any thoughts of, again, like I said in DB11, of this being some kind of a reshelled AMG, throw it out of your mind, because the Aston work that's been done in here is very, very evident. The other thing then is the gearbox, which you, I'm sure, can predict, not quite as snappy as a sports car. Upshifts are quick but measured. Downshifts happen pretty quick. But I found that the gearbox is quite clever, that if you are pushing and you want to downshift, the shifts do happen quite quick, but then it starts to manage those shift times based on the style of your driving at the time, at least from what I can see, because sometimes then it just calms down and it's quite a slow gear shift up and down. What I love about this car is because it is rear wheel driven, you have to give it that respect, because 680 brake in a car like this is a lot going to the rear wheels, and then trying to exit with as much speed, it's intimidating. But I love that fact because it reminds you of the best cars where you need to be measured in your inputs. You can't just plonk your foot down and expect to be saved by an all-wheel drive system. So it's nice, it's engaging. The more you drive it, I think every drive I've driven in this was rewarding. Every drive made me smile. Every drive I learned something about the way the car handles. I appreciated kind of the rigidity versus the older ones, and often it does such a good job of convincing you that it's a sports car that you're kind of like, is this even a Grand Tourer anymore? But then you shift into GT mode and it's perfectly happy doing the Grand Touring, and more importantly, it's pleasurable while doing the Grand Touring. It still sounds good, it still behaves as you would expect this car to behave given its looks. Now, settling down into GT mode, the DB12 is clearly just a better car to live with, thanks mainly to those more intelligent, more up-to-date active dampers. And we're finding this in every new car, right? Modern day electronic active dampers just simply increase the breadth of ability of cars, particularly like this, where you need to have a stiffness and a firmness and more body control when you're driving sportier. But then when you settle down, you need to make sure that bumps, potholes, unevenness in the road surface don't completely dislodge the vehicle, don't make us as the passengers feel like we're driving something that we'd rather not be driving on these type of roads. And that's exactly what the new suspension does for the DB12. It just makes it a really, really nice car to drive from A to B without any of the flashy stuff. And I think that's a really important part of being an Aston Martin driver as well. You don't always want to be driving 9/10ths. A lot of it is just sometimes going from A to B, doing your usual errands, but doing it in style, in a beautiful car with tons of heritage. But then the car needs to be able to handle normal roads just as well as nice curvy ones. In a more in-town environment, it's often hard to believe that you're driving something that is as sporty as we found on our country roads. The DB12 really does just settle into a smoothness that you just don't liken to this shape of car. The gearbox is compliant, the steering is nice and light, the suspension deals with any unevenness, and it's often lower speeds where these type of cars get a bit more unhinged. You still do get a lot of kind of vibration and jiggle and stuff, but nothing that kind of puts you off, and you're still kind of aware this is a very sporty car versus something like a Bentley GT. And I think all of that is fine for DB12. I think all of that works. You've got things like active lane keeping assist, etc. I'd like to see them, like I said, expand on this. I'd like to see massaging seats in here because it's an expensive luxury car. I'd like to see self-driving as well. Those type of things need to come in, more driving assistance, etc. And it would make this a more complete package. And more than that, I really hope that they keep to their word of less production numbers, more support for current customers, keeping the over-the-air updates coming. That will really, really be the key for Aston, I think, going forward. Bottom line is, I love driving it fast, I love driving it slow, I love the way it looks, I love the way it sounds, and now it's not hindered, at least not as much, by the infotainment system. Is the term Super Tourer or the first Super Tourer correct? I wouldn't say it's the first Super Tourer. I think there's other cars out there that do a really good job of being Super Tourers as well. But I think that this is the most convincing Super Tourer that Aston have ever put out. I think it blows away the competition in terms of design, and I think where it has just the right amount of sportiness where you're like, yes, this is a sports car, or at least as close as a Grand Tourer can get to being a sports car. And on the other side, if you calm things down, it is really, really much better at doing the slower stuff as well. So for the first time, I can truly recommend a DB car as being not hindered or compromised in any way. You'll be very happy, I think, when you own this. I've certainly had an absolute blast driving this. So guys, if you've enjoyed this episode of RBR, as always, please do like and subscribe. You are the key to unlocking more opportunities for RBR, more manufacturers, because sadly a lot of them don't look at the effort we do, they just look at that subscriber number. So please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.